Somewhere in a UNSC casualty file, there's a Spartan marked KIA. Killed in action, body never recovered. Case closed. Except he wasn't dead. He was training children to kill things Spartans hadn't even been built to fight yet. And naval intelligence made sure nobody, not even his own squad, ever found out. Not his commanding officers. Not the people who'd bled next to him for 20 years. Not even the woman who built him. This is the story of Kurt 051, the Spartan who died on paper and disappeared everywhere else, twice. Part 1, The Belief. Every Halo fan knows the shape of the Spartan 2 story. Halsey abducts 75 children. Rough men and women, Mendez included, turn them into soldiers. Augmentation kills or cripples a third of the class. The survivors become the greatest weapons humanity has. That's the story everyone remembers. Chief, Fred, Kelly, Linda. But the official history of Blue Team has a hole in it. A teammate who trained beside them, fought beside them, and then just isn't there anymore? Not dead in the emotional sense the games give Spartans like Sam or Vin, where the loss gets a name and a moment. Erased, filed away, forgotten on purpose, by design, by people who decided his squad didn't have the clearance to know the truth. Kurt wasn't a background character. In the early years, he's one of the strongest of the 75. Fast, tactically sharp, the kind of Spartan other Spartans look to when a plan needed fixing on the fly. That matters because it makes what happens to him later worse. This isn't a minor soldier disappearing into paperwork. This is one of the best people in the program, and the UNSC decided he was more useful erased than accounted for. Part 2, The Contradiction. In 2530, on Circinius IV, a UNSC report logs Kurt 051 as killed in action. Covenant forces overwhelm the position. No confirmed remains. Standard language for a war that rarely gave bodies back, which is exactly why it works as a cover story. Nobody double-checks a death record when the alternative is a body bag that never existed to begin with. Blue Team grieves him. The Master Chief himself carries that loss for years. One more name on a list that never seems to stop growing. One more reason the surviving Spartans stop letting themselves get close to people. Here's the contradiction. Years later, deep in classified UNSC programs, Spartan Two Eyes on a black site world called Onyx are being trained by a man who calls himself Kurt. Same voice patterns, same instincts, same scars in the same places, the ones only another Spartan 2 would recognize. The UNSC didn't misplace a body. Someone rewrote the death of a living Spartan and let his own brothers and sisters mourn a lie for over a decade. Part 3, Who actually pulled him out. Before we get to what Kurt did on Onyx, you need to understand who erased him, because it isn't some faceless bureaucracy. It's one man with a grudge. Colonel James Ackerson spends most of the Spartan 2 timeline as one of Halsey's fiercest internal critics. He thinks her program is too small, too slow, too expensive, and too dependent on children who might wash out or die under augmentation. He wants a cheaper, faster, more expendable alternative. Soldiers who don't need the rarest genetic profiles in the UNSC to survive the process. That alternative becomes Spartan 3. And Ackerson needs someone to run it who already knows how to build a Spartan from nothing. Someone who's lived through Mendez's training doctrine from the inside. Kurt 051 is the perfect candidate. Combat proven, loyal to the UNSC, and, critically, reported dead. A ghost makes an excellent covert program director, because ghosts don't have to answer questions from people who knew them before. So Ackerson's people extract Kurt from Circinius IV before the Covenant can finish the job, and instead of returning him to his unit, they bury him in classified status. Not rescued, reassigned into non-existence. Part 4, The Evidence. The evidence for all of this comes from Halo, Ghosts of Onyx, and the details get more disturbing the closer you look. Unlike the Spartan 2s, who came from careful genetic screening of the most promising children in the outer colonies, the Spartan 3s weren't recruited that way at all. They were orphans, children who'd already lost their families to the Covenant, easier to disappear into a program that officially didn't exist because nobody was tracking them closely in the first place. Kurt trained them, hardened them, shaped the doctrine that would later produce entire of Spartan 3s. including the training pipeline that eventually leads to Noble Team. His fingerprints are on some of the most consequential Spartans in the entire war, and almost nobody who served with the Spartan 2s ever connects those dots. And to keep it all sealed, Onai let his own squad keep grieving him. Fred, Kelly, Linda, John. None of them knew their brother was alive on a planet that wasn't on any star chart civilians could access. For over a decade, every time Blue Team lost someone new, they were adding grief on top of a loss that was never real to begin with. That's the detail the wiki version of this story skips past. It wasn't just a faked death. It was a faked death maintained against the people who loved him. Because naval intelligence decided a functioning Spartan 3 program mattered more than a squad's right to know their friend survived. Part 5. The cost nobody talks about. Here's a detail that rarely makes it into the highlight reel version of this story. The Spartan 3 program Kurt built was never meant to have the survival rate of the Spartan 2s. Ackerson designed it to be cheaper, specifically because the expected losses were higher. Kurt knew that going in. He spent years training children he understood. Going into it, would die at a higher rate than the class he came from. That's not a minor footnote. That's the actual price of erasing him. Not just what it cost Blue Team to lose him without knowing why, but what it cost the children he trained, who never got the resourcing or survival odds the Spartan 2s had, because the program's entire justification was that they were more disposable. Kurt doesn't rebel against this. He runs the program as designed because he believes, like most Spartans raised inside the UNSC's chain of command, that the war against the Covenant justifies almost anything. That belief is exactly what made him useful to a race in the first place. A Spartan who asks fewer questions is a Spartan who's easier to disappear. Part 6. The reveal. Here's where it gets worse for Kurt. The erasure didn't end with Cercinius IV. In 2552, Onyx itself turns out to be something ONI never suspected. A Forerunner shield world in disguise, dormant beneath the planet's crust for 100,000 years, activated during a Covenant assault on the surface. Kurt 051 leads Spartan 3s and civilians into the unfolding Forerunner structure to escape annihilation, choosing to protect the children of a program built on treating children as expendable. And then the timeline does something almost cruel. Onyx's activation causes a divergence in local spacetime. The planet effectively slips out of normal space into a Forerunner-constructed dimension called the Ethereum. Sealed off from the rest of the galaxy behind Forerunner-grade barriers nothing in the UNSC arsenal can breach. To everyone outside, Onyx simply goes dark. No transmissions, no confirmation of survivors. The man who was already erased once by Oni's paperwork is now erased a second time by physics itself. For years, nobody in the UNSC even knows if Kurt 051 is alive inside that shield world or gone for good. He becomes a rumor of a rumor. A man twice buried, once in a file cabinet and once in a fold of space nobody can reach. Part 7. What happened to the people he left behind? Blue Team eventually learns the truth. That Ani let them mourn a living man for years to protect a classified program. This isn't a rumor they pieced together on their own. It comes out through official channels once the Spartan 3 program stops being a secret worth keeping. And here's what should bother you more than the initial cover-up. The franchise never really lets Blue Team process it on screen. No reckoning. No confrontation with Ackerson that changes anything about how ONI operates. The betrayal just sits there, folded into a shield world along with the man it happened to, treated as one more classified footnote in a war that produced thousands of them. Halsey herself, the woman who built these Spartans and considers them hers in a way that borders on maternal, doesn't get to intervene either. Ackerson's program exists specifically because he wants alternatives to Halsey's methods and Halsey's oversight. Erasing Kurt isn't just a strike against Blue Team, it's a move in an internal ONI power struggle where Spartans are the currency being spent. Part 8. The pattern this reveals. Once you see how cleanly Kurt 051 was erased, it's worth asking an uncomfortable question. Was he the only one? The honest answer is that the Halo universe doesn't give us a full account, and that's the point. ONI's entire operating principle, demonstrated over and over across the games, novels, and terminals, is that information gets compartmentalized ruthlessly. Need to know applied even to the people risking their lives inside these programs. Kurt's case isn't a unique glitch in the system. It's the system working exactly as designed, and we only know about it because a Forerunner shield world eventually got discovered, and the classified history had to surface along with it. If Onyx had stayed hidden, if the Covenant had never attacked it, if the shield world had never activated, Kurt-051 would simply still be dead. Permanently, in every record that matters. Blue Team would have gone their entire lives believing it. That's the version of this story where the cover-up never gets caught. And it's worth remembering that for every Kurt-051 the fandom eventually learns about, Onai's entire design philosophy assumes there are others who never get discovered at all. Part 9. The Implication. Kurt-051 didn't die at Circinius IV. He didn't die on Onyx either, as far as anyone can confirm. What actually happened to the Spartan they erased from history is still, officially, buried in a shield world outside normal space, sealed behind Forerunner technology nobody in the UNSC fully understands, which raises the question nobody in the UNSC wanted asked in the first place. If Oni could erase one of their best Spartans this completely, maintain the lie for over a decade against his own squad, and only get caught because of an unrelated Forerunner discovery, how many other names on those casualty lists are lies too? And if you were one of the people who trusted that chain of command with your life, would you ever be able to tell the difference between a real death and a convenient one?